On today's show, we're going to get into the Mavs final roster situation. And did anything else happen in Mavs Twitter or media or anything this weekend?
Nope, nothing else happened because it's opening week in the NBA. Let's go!
Maybe a disgruntled employee said a bunch of stuff on Twitter.
It's opening week in the NBA. Let's go!
There's maybe some tea spilt. We'll talk about that coming up on today's Locked On Mavs.
Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
The Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good!
And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and coordinator for the Locked On Podcast Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, writer, and contributor at Mavs.com. The tea spilling tot, the one more thinking. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
It's opening week. This is one of the most exciting weeks of the NBA.
Huge.
We talk about trade deadline week, finals, playoffs starting. If you had to rank the weeks, All-Star weekend is a lot of fun, free agency. Yeah. But opening week, it's a lot of fun. It starts here, tomorrow, and they're going to be releasing the top 75 players this week, which is a lot of fun. Every 25 years, we get this kind of, and a lot of controversy over the top 50. We'll see. There'll be all kinds of debates on the Twitter sphere over this top 75 and the snubs, but the Mavericks play basketball this week, like meaningful basketball this week, and we're super hyped.
On Thursday, thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen every single day. Remember, Locked On Mavs is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Mavericks. We hit our goal. 7,777 subscribers before the season started. We nailed it, guys. Thank you so much. Inching our way now to 8,000. Thank you for listening to us. Like you said, the Mavericks play on Thursday. So today we're going to be getting into the final roster was announced. There was a Frank Ntilikina over Tyrell Terry situation. Tyrell Terry was cut from the team. We'll talk about that and explain why. And then we've been teasing it. We've been alluding to it. Haralabob Voulgaris is back on Twitter, fully back on NBA Twitter, spilled some tea about a couple of things. And there's some interesting like tidbits, nuggets, just his perspective on how things went down. We'll get into it. He talked about a bunch of players that, the ones that got away, a bunch of players that the Mavericks could have gotten. So we'll speculate wildly about those players like we love to do. He talked about Josh Green versus Saddiq Bey. That was a whole conversation. He mentioned if he's the shadow GM. So we'll get into that. And then just a bunch of other stuff we'll talk about with Haralabos Voulgaris. So we'll get into that. But yeah, let's focus on the NBA, the Mavericks final roster situation. Let's get into it. The Mavericks named their roster. They kept Trey Burke. They kept Frank Ntilikina. And they kept everyone else except for Tyrell Terry and Ferran Hunt and Carlik Jones. The two-way guys stayed the two-way guys in Eugene Omoruyi and Ja'Cory McLaughlin. And they got rid of Tyrell Terry. What was your initial reaction when it said that the Mavericks were releasing Tyrell Terry?
Super bummer for him. That was my initial reaction to it. Exchanged a few texts with him as soon as it came out, and you guys know I did a story with him right after he got drafted, and I just felt for him because we sat down with him, what was it? Gosh, I don't know how many weeks ago. Media day, yeah. And talked to him, and he opened up to us about why he missed last year. He was gone away from the team, and he opened up about his mental health. You go back and listen to that, watch it on YouTube, and how he learned so much about himself and his family history in regards to mental health. He had to take some time away from the game. And now, there's a family situation going on. He's been away from the team. So it's just really unfortunate for him because it's not like, we're looking at it. He did something, all this stuff on the court. Even Jason Kidd, you asked a great question, after the game the other day, and he's like, "Hey, I can't really say anything about it." It's like he almost couldn't he
couldn't help himself.
Well, it's like he couldn't really judge the play of Tyrell because he hasn't gotten to really see it a ton because Ty's been gone. And I'll say this too. I've been kind of disappointed with a little bit of the conversation happening around Ty being gone of some people kind of taking it into this fandom in general, but fandom taking it a step further, see it by you can't even be around the team, then leave, see a Ty, see a Ty Terry and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, well, like we want to talk about mental health, but when someone has to step away from the game, then we want to, oh, well, you can't be around the team and all. Like, come on. Like, I haven't liked some of that discourse and that conversation, kind of bashing. If you want to talk about, Ty, whether you think his basketball skills are, suitable for long-term in the NBA, that's one conversation. But if you're going to really bash the guy because he wasn't around the team because of mental health and a family situation, I'm not here for that. So I feel for him right now, and I hope he latches on to another organization.
Yeah, that's the whole conversation you don't want to see. And it is just lazy takes on, oh, well, he best ability is availability. He can't stay with the team, that whole kind of thing. And I think it's sort of being treated unfairly because both situations are different. The one that he's in right now away from the team is different than the situation he was in last season when he was away from the team. So yeah, say what you want to say about his skills, but trying to judge what he's away for and why and all that is just kind of, that's too much. We don't know enough about that situation. Onto the roster, though. You mentioned it. Jason Kidd did tell us after the Mavericks' last preseason game, he said, we had to make a decision between Frank Ntilikina and Tyrell Terry, and we chose Frank. And that was fascinating to me because it came down to those two guys. It didn't come down to a Trey Burke situation. It didn't come down to somebody else on the team. It came down, or Moses Brown or whoever. It came down to Frank and Tyrell Terry, which was really interesting. I think a lot of people thought it was between Trey Burke and Frank Ntilikina, when instead it was about Frank Ntilikina and Tyrell Terry.
Yeah, because Ty was just a second-round draft pick, last year, second-round pick. I think we
31st pick. He was the first pick in the second round. So I mean,
yes, but we still need to throw that out there because that was another discourse that was happening after he got released in waived. Was, oh my gosh, look at that 2020 draft. I'm like, okay, well,
I mean, it isn't looking good.
But I tweeted out, I'm like, hey, let's look at the other players in the second round that we're taking in the 2020 draft. It's like, all right, are you losing sleep over them not taking insert whatever player that was drafted after Tyrell Terry? The only one that you could maybe think about is Xavier Tillman. It's like
the ones that went after him.
Yeah, so it's like second rounders are swings. Like, it's unfortunate. I hate that they didn't work out, him and Tyler Bey, but I'm not sitting here like going to sleep mad that a second round pick didn't work out. Now, if Josh Green doesn't work out, that's a different conversation because that's a different standard there. That's a top 20 pick. That's an 18th overall pick. If Josh Green turns out to be nothing, then that's a big whiff. And that's a key part that could have been really crucial at that contract, that number, to build around Luka. So I understand the Josh Green thing, but taking the shots at Mavs over second round picks not working, I'm like, okay, come on. I'm out of here for that.
Yeah, we'll go back into the 2020 draft when we talk about Haralabos Voulgaris' comments a little bit later. So the Mavs final roster is as it stands. They had a little bit of they signed Justin Jackson back with the greatest floater in NBA history.
I just tweeted out the transaction, and I purposely didn't reply to anybody's tweet. I didn't leave any of like the detail, like the whole Texas legend. I'm like, I'm just going to tweet out and just let people be like, what the crap is happening? And I thought it was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah, so the Mavs signed Justin Jackson and EJ Onu. They basically signed them to then unsign them just so that they can have their rights to play for the Texas Legends. So the Texas Legends should be really good, right? With Carlik Jones, you got Justin Jackson, you're gonna have Ferran Hunt, you're probably gonna
best floater in the game.
EJ Onu, you're gonna have a lot of guys. Probably Moses Brown will play some games for them. I'm guessing a couple here and there. It's gonna be interesting to see. And Tyrell Terry could still play for them, right? We don't know that.
Yeah, he could. I will say this about the final roster, something that I didn't think would happen. When this roster was put together, I didn't think, and I said on the spot, and I'm eating my crow right now, I never thought in a million years that the Mavericks would go into the season with all the centers on the roster.
Yep.
I never did. And I said, I'm like, there's no way they're going to do it, especially in today's day and age. There's no way they're going to take all of them into the season. And you know what they're doing? They're taking all of them into the season. So,
and to me, that says they're really committed to Porzingis at the 4.
Committed to him at the 4. I think there's a little bit to like being able to match up some salaries too. You cut Tyrell Terry, that's just $1 million compared to, and I mean, some people might laugh and be like, who cares about a couple million? But like, you have a Trey Burke that's making what, $3-4 million. That's a little bit more money you could throw into a trade. Same thing with Willie Cauley-Stein in that. But and Moses is so young. That could be a young ish piece to put into a deal later on. So I get it to an extent, but basketball wise, I'm kind of surprised that they're taking that many centers But we love Moses now, so I'm not complaining. Love Moses.
We do love Moses. After all of our conversations with players, it was like, dang, like all these guys. Yeah, the Mavs definitely have a move to make, and I think that's what this final roster tells us, that they have a move to make sometime during the season. It could be small, could just be on the fringes, but hopefully it brings in some kind of secondary creator or somebody to help the Mavericks. All right, coming up, let's get into the Haralabob Voulgaris talk. He talked a lot on Twitter. He said a lot of things. We'll get into all those things coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Prize Picks. If you are an NBA daily fantasy fanatic and you want to try a new game, something fun, something different, Prize Picks is the best NBA daily fantasy prop game on the market. It offers NBA props it offers more props than any other daily fantasy operator, and offers all the superstar players as well as the bench players as well. If you want to make a bet on probably Moses Brown rebounds, I bet you could go on Prize Picks and make that for the game on Thursday. Go check out all the stuff they have available for Prize Picks. You just basically pick, let's say it's Luka over under 30 points for their opening game on Thursday. You can pick the over. You can combine that with, let's say, Moses Brown over under like 5 rebounds. You pick the over on that. You can combine those two. Prize Picks will give you the odds on that, and then they will then you'll be able to put money down on it. You can go ahead and also put down $100, and they will match that $100 if you use the promo code NBA, and they'll match anything up to $100 as well in an instant match using the promo code NBA. So go check out Prize Picks. The daily code, the NBA code is NBA. PrizePicks.com. Download their app as well. Also, I want to tell you about DirecTV Stream. We're getting to the point right now where everyone is like, how do I watch the Mavericks? I'm sure Brad Townsend or Callie Kaplan will come out with an article. The streaming wars.
Callie already did.
Did she already? Yeah, she already came out with one. How will you be able to watch the Mavericks this year? I ran into that problem where like, I have YouTube TV. How am I supposed to watch the Mavericks? DirecTV Stream is a way you can watch the Mavericks this year. They have Valley Sports on it. Go check it out. DirecTV Stream. Get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. Go to directtv.com and you can see what is available with DirecTV Stream. Go check it out. Make sure check first for your area and your location. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. DirecTV Stream, directtv.com. All right, Isaac Harris, let's get into the tea that was spilled. Haralabos Voulgaris, he's back on Twitter. And he was very clear several times that he had some offers from some other NBA teams to come join their analytics department or go join their organization in some way, but he's not interested in that. He likes the freedom of not being in the NBA, and so he is able to tweet wildly now, which, you know, is great. It's like when Magic Johnson got back on Twitter. You're like, great, Magic Johnson can tweet wildly about things again. And Haralabos Voulgaris is the same way. So he went off, he said a bunch of stuff. He kind of did an AMA, but then also was saying some things. The first one that stuck out to me, he talks about the ones that got away. And it was Nate Jones, who's a well-known NBA figure, and said, I like the Mikal Bridges thing after Mikal Bridges got his extension. He says, I like Mikal Bridges. Haralabob quote tweets that and says, the ones that got away chronologically. Here we go. So this is players that the Mavericks could have gotten if a couple of things had gone right, whether the owner says yes or the front office pulls off a move or something. These are the players that Haralabob says he targeted basically that got away from the Mavericks. Mikal Bridges, Duncan Robinson, Robert Covington, Matisse Thybulle, Alex Caruso, Christian Wood, Tyrese Halliburton. All those players could have been Mavericks at some point. And by the way, Haralabos Voulgaris was an analytics guy that was brought in by Mark Cuban to the organization. I'm sure everybody knows this at this point, but if you don't know this, he was brought in for Mark Cuban to have somebody else to kind of be a voice, the analytics voice for the team, and he really butted heads. There was this big article in The Athletic over the offseason where he butted heads with Luka. He butted heads with, it seemed like, Carlisle, with Donnie Nelson, definitely with the people in the front office. We heard things about how he was butting heads in the front office. There's just all kinds of things that happened with that. It was a big conversation over the summer. Everybody asked Cuban, and everybody is Bob still on the team? What about Bob? And now he's gone. His contract was not renewed by Nico Harrison. So that's who Bob is. So he talks about players that got away. He actually did have some say in some of these players. And so let's just speculate wildly and go through. When do we think these actually happen? So Mikal Bridges, the first one that comes to mind is like, okay, same draft as Luka. It's not like they were going to draft him over Luka. So maybe they had like some kind of trade on the table available for that. That's the only thing that kind of makes sense, because I don't think that Phoenix was looking to trade him after the draft. So maybe a draft night trade with, I think it was the 76ers that initially drafted him.
Yeah, it's crazy when you look at Mikal and Zaire Smith, and I was texting with a friend of mine, Scott, today about just the difference of careers in Mikal and and Zaire Smith. And it's like one just got paid $20 million a year, the other one is not in the league anymore.
What's he do? Yeah, what's he doing? I don't even know.
But no, yeah, I mean, yes, it would probably have to be Luka Doncic's draft.
Which, yeah, so that night,
Not over Luka, but like you said, Philly, Phoenix, they worked out a draft, night trade. We had all, if you remember draft night, the whole Mikal, like, oh, his mom worked for the franchise in Philly, he's going to Philly, and then bam, he went to Phoenix.
I forgot about that
and all of that. But yeah, I mean, I think if we want to naturally try to read between the lines here, saying could have been that draft, possibly so, and could they have walked away with that draft with Luka and Mikal Bridges? I don't know. Now, I will say this.
That would have been awesome.
You phrased something in the way of like the Mavericks could have gotten these guys. He did like preface in this of saying like the reason why they didn't, it's not like that Dallas said no, and that's why they didn't get all of these players. He did preface this of saying like,
that's true.
It's the powers that be, whether it's the Mavericks or convincing the other teams that like to get them.
That's true. This was his quote about these players that got, the ones that got away. He says either couldn't pull off a deal or couldn't convince the powers that be to make the deal. So there's maybe a couple
very vague comment by Bob there.
So it's like either the other team said no or that Cuban
could have got Giannis.
Right.
But it's because either the powers that be or you just couldn't work out a deal, I mean.
So it's kind of hard to know which ones are which, but the Mikal Bridges one, it's a fun what if, because if the Mavs had Luka and Mikal Bridges, that's a heck of a combination.
Oh yeah, I mean, we freaking love Mikal Bridges.
We loved him before the draft for sure.
Yeah, and some of these other names on that list, Rob Covington, that was reported on last draft. The same thing with Tyrese Halliburton. A lot of these names. Now there were a couple names on here that I didn't know anything about. As far as like I knew about the Covington one, knew about the Bridges one, knew about the Halliburton one, but
Christian Wood was a camp invite for the Mavs. Like he was one that literally got away because they didn't keep him.
Yeah. I mean, he was in camp for Dallas, but like the Caruso one and the Thibault one, I'm curious on what that
Caruso is weird because Caruso was in the G League for a while.
Yeah.
That one's like, okay. Well,
the Duncan Robinson one, he
was an undrafted free agent in that 2018 offseason as well. So what if the Mavericks had gotten Luka, Bridges, and then Duncan Robinson as well? Heck yeah.
I don't want to do the whole like reporting game because I'm not that type. Like we're not reporters, but the whole like you talk to the right people. It's like there was some interest as far as like signing him as an undrafted guy, but classifying him as a guy who like fell through the fingers. We could have had him. I don't know how close some of these were.
Yeah, right. So that's just all the players that he named in this. It's pretty interesting. So he went back and forth with people about draft misses and makes, and apparently someone in the organization made him mad because they were talking about their hits and they didn't talk about their misses, and so we're like, okay.
Can I just I just want to say this.
A free agent, we'll talk about it in a second. A free agent though that he did mention was he said, pretty sure it's been widely reported that I wanted to sign XYZ as a free agent one year. And are we going to gloat over the fact that he's had some injury issues since then and deal would not have worked out, thereby mocking, denigrating his struggles? That's Kemba Walker, right? Like that's obviously to me Kemba Walker he's talking about there, which is interesting.
Well, he was,
that he said it was him that wanted to sign Kemba.
Yeah, because when he was like taken up for like why he wasn't talking about like some people were kind of calling him out on like some of the misses, and he was like, hey, why would I sit here and call out basically Kemba in this, and like what's that going to do for him? Like we're gonna so I get why he's not doing that.
But I found it interesting that he was the one pushing for that, which is it's just interesting. But coming up, there's a bunch more to get into. There's the talk about the draft stuff, the Josh Green, Saddiq Bey draft, which is just something we've talked about a lot. But he also mentioned about being a shadow GM. He talks about sleeper teams in the NBA, best player development guys, a bunch of other questions we'll get into coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're delicious. I got a new pack. I'm excited to try. There's new flavors coming out.
I tried one today.
Which one did you try?
A blueberry.
The blueberry one. What'd you think about it?
Pretty good. I like it.
Blueberry muffin coming out soon. They also have a pumpkin puff pumpkin spice everywhere, right? All that
Yeah.
pumpkin. And so if you've tried the puff bars before, they have marshmallow in the middle of them. They're absolutely delicious. Go check it out. For a strawberry puff right now, 130 calories, 17 grams of protein, 5 grams of sugar. That's available on the website, built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15. That's available right now. But the pumpkin one is coming soon. Blueberry muffin, regular Built Bar is coming soon. Go check it out. Use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your total order of anything you put on there. You can put the mint brownie, which is always solid. They have cookie dough chunk right now, Rocky Road, the strawberry puff. There's all kinds of great stuff you can check out on Built. Use the promo code LOCKED15. All right, Isaac Harris, let's get into some more about Haralabob Voulgaris. He was a part of the front office, and now he's not anymore, and now he's talking. He's talking a lot. So here's one. So he's talking about the hit. His big point, I guess, was people talk about the hits and misses of draft picks and people and players that they, wanted and that, there's apparently somebody in the front office that said that he has more hits than misses, and that Haralabob doesn't think that's true. One of the comments he said was, I liked Josh over S. Bey. Doesn't even name him, like over Saddiq Bey. Nobody vocally objected to that until the season was over. And those that did had Dennis Smith Jr. over Donovan Mitchell and Bam and Wendell Carter Jr. over Trae Young. Drafting 18 to 20-year-olds is hard. It's a little early to congratulate yourself on that one. So he's calling somebody out in the front office who said that they wanted Saddiq Bey over Josh Green. And and I think many people in media thought that it was going to be Saddiq Bey over Josh Green. We were surprised that it was Josh Green. And so now he's coming after somebody saying that, well, if you keep saying you wanted Saddiq Bey over Josh Green, but you also wanted Dennis Smith Jr. over Donovan Mitchell and and Bam, and then Wendell Carter Jr. over Trae Young, right? Like he's just going after somebody.
Yeah, okay. This is where it got a little just dumb for me, to be honest. Like this is giving me vibes of like my kids, to where like I look at my son and be like, you're in trouble. And then my 3-year-old saying, well, she did something too. And it's like, okay, like what are we doing here? It's like it feels like he's really heard the Josh Green, Saddiq Bey story. It's been reported. Everything's out.
We talked about it a lot.
There was some discussion and debate on draft night, no matter like how he wants to like portray that on Twitter, that, there was nothing until after the season. Yeah. So that it's just the whole vibe of it's like, okay, well, if you want to call me out on this, well, this person did this, and with Dennis, it didn't have like, they picked Dennis over. I'm like, what are we doing right now?
You think you're so smart about basketball? Well, you had this over this, right? It's like draft guys just make it like going after each other on Twitter.
It just feels like I mean, he is so smart, and he is smarter than I will ever be in my life at anything. Sure. And it was a weird thing to see on Twitter that he was just like trying to just dive into this, like, oh yeah, I missed on this, but these guys missed on X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, they did this and all of that. It was just a weird thing. Like he wanted Josh, he wanted some other people too. He wanted DeLon Wright, he wanted Josh Richardson, like he wanted some other, like people missed. Like that's okay. Like it's part of the business. He said in all of his tweets, it's so hard in the draft process, and it really, really is.
Yeah.
But like, it was just that, I have issues with a couple of those tweets of the validity of those.
It is interesting though. And it is interesting to look back and be like, okay, well, this is where the tension was, right? This is where the tension in the front office was about these draft picks, about the players that, you had on your board higher than somebody else. And so he goes on to say, and if you're going to congratulate yourself, maybe take a look in the mirror on Dennis Smith Jr. versus Donovan Mitchell or Bam Adebayo. To say nothing of the guy that had Luka at number 2 on his board and then did a media tour congratulating himself for discovering him afterwards. So if you've listened to this podcast, you can maybe put 2 and 2 together and figure out who it is. He also said not DN, so not Donnie Nelson. He's not like calling out Donnie Nelson, but it's somebody in the Mavs organization. Then he went on to say, Haralabob went on to say, you can certainly pat yourself on the back when 2 of your picks were Dirk and Luka over the course of 20 years, if that's your thing, but maybe don't knock others that whiffed on picks unless you are willing to acknowledge your whiffs too. Whew.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He also does the whole thing of like, hey, I'm not gonna like bash on Saddiq Bey, but also I want to point out basically the only reason he made all rookie is because he led rookies in minutes. It's like, I'm like, okay, well, you really are discrediting Saddiq Bey at this point. So it comes across as the disgruntled ex-employee who's not with the company anymore that says, hey, I just want to air all my crap out. And like, even the initial tweet of that, he quote tweeted, like, it wasn't even, to my knowledge, that Nate Jones tweet wasn't even a tweet at him, right?
No,
it was just,
not at all.
He just quote tweeted and just started, which is, it's fun for content. I mean, we're doing a pod about it and people are listening and watching a YouTube video. Like and subscribe below. And like, I get all of that. It's just, some people will take these tweets and believe like 100% of that. And there's a little bit that, you could hear another side, the other side on it.
Here's one that I do believe, though. Somebody asked him, well, weren't you the shadow GM? Blah, blah, blah. Couldn't you just make this happen? And he says, I was never the GM nor shadow GM, which I like how he had to like.
Tim Cato's like, check.
I never discussed trades with other teams. Mavs had a GM and an owner who generally made the final decision. I was just one of the voices, albeit at times a very influential one. So I agree with that, right? He was. We agree that he was somebody in the organization. He was the one that liked Josh Green, and they drafted Josh Green. That's how influential his voice was at some point.
100%.
So the line
That's why there was some tension on draft night, because he wanted Josh Green. Some other people in the room wanted Saddiq Bey. There was some tension there. Like that's there. And he won out on that. His side won out on that. They got Josh Green.
What's interesting to me is the difference between being such an influential voice that they drafted Josh Green. They drafted a player that you picked.
Yeah.
To I'm also not a shadow GM. So it's like, okay, well,
where's
the line there, right?
And some other roster moves too. Like Donnie signed off on the Josh Richardson move, but he was a fan of Josh Richardson. He was a big fan of he was a big fan of DeLon Wright. So like that, but he also had a point too, and he kind of put the Mavericks kind of on the scope a little bit, or the bullseye a little bit, of when he tweeted out a picture of the 3-point. It was like the change in 3-point percentage or something.
The 3-point rate compared
to
3-point
rate, there was
where it was last season. In the preseason, the Mavs 3-point rate, so the percentage of shots they're taking that are threes compared to the percentage of shots that they were taking that were threes in the regular season last year. So just a solid like 4 games versus 72 game sample size. But the Mavericks were the lowest. They taken the lowest percentage of threes compared to the threes that they'd taken, last season in the regular season.
But this is where he's going to track that, I think, and all of us will look at it too, of if the Mavericks offense doesn't perform at where it's been over the past few years, I think you're going to look at it and be like, dang, Haralabob, like Bob's gone. Like Bob for what? I mean, I have my issues with some of his tweets. I think some of it's just kind of like whatever, but he's super smart and he knows what he's doing when it comes to analytics and like what they were doing offensively. And he was all about the 3 and all about wings and comparing. He even tweeted out, he's like, I'm more of a wing guy than bigs. Like he gets everything where the NBA is going and all of that. And so it will be very, very interesting to where if there is this drastic shift in their offense to where the 3-point rate, which, on that chart, Dallas was last on, on that chart as far as the biggest difference of going down in these 3-point attempts, which we've talked about some in the preseason. If that goes down and it doesn't equate in wins, then the Bob conversation isn't going anywhere then. Because then it's like, okay, well, he was a headache, but at least our offense was amazing. And then it's like, all right, we you at least understood some of the offensive stuff. And so, I don't even know what else to say about it. I was just
so we'll see. Yeah, and he does say it's a 4-game sample size in preseason, so it depends on who's playing. The Mavericks didn't have their starters for a lot of the preseason and all that. So there's all kinds of different. Reggie Bullock didn't play most of the preseason. There's all kinds of different things you can go in.
And look, I want to brag on him. Yeah, and I want to brag on him one more time too. Look at that list of the guys who got away. How many of those guys would have been great in Dallas, right? Like if he got his way,
all of them.
If he got his way on a lot of these, not just the misses. Like I'll sit there and highlight the misses he had, but he wanted Mikal Bridges on this team. Like if they could have pulled off Rob Covington, if they could have pulled off Tyrese Halliburton, these guys would have been great on the Mavs. So I'm not sitting here saying either that all Bob wanted was all bad. It's not that at all. It's give and take, right? It's what he's wanting with someone, in the Mavs front office or past, front office. But it goes with him too, that he had his own misses and own issues.
Last couple things I just want to bring up quickly. Someone asked him who are his 3 sleeper teams in the NBA. Teams that haven't had a lot of, playoff success that he thinks are going to be really good this year. He mentions Mavs, Warriors, Bulls, Kings in that
Warriors?
order. Question mark.
Playoff success?
Those are his teams he named, but he still believes in the Mavs, which is interesting to me. He just has qualms about what this front office member said about his drafts picking, right?
I do think he had another tweet too saying that he does not believe this current roster is championship caliber roster.
No, which we agree with him on that.
Yeah, well,
You think this roster is championship caliber right now? You're buying into the 4-game preseason hype.
There's a path. I don't want to say I'm not ready to say push all my chips in the middle and say no. But the past few years, I'm pushing him into the middle saying no way at all. This year, I'm like, all right, I would lean no, but there's a few pathways that things could turn out.
Sure, there's a path, but you're not saying they're a contender.
I don't put them in that group of Brooklyn,
right.
Lakers, Bucks, but
right.
I think they could be in that next group.
Sure, right. Then he also said, someone asked him, who's the best player development guy in the NBA? He said, this is a tough one to answer unless you're able to watch practice and workouts. I had the pleasure of working with the legendary God, Shamgod, and he has to be up there with one of the best player development guys around. I just love that he also gave Shamgod that shout out, but that he's still on the Mavs. He made it through the coaching change. He's still in the Mavs working with guys. We actually have talked about on this show before the work that he did with Harrison Barnes to get him to be a much better, off the dribble player and all that. He really helped his game out a lot. So I just thought that was a positive note from this whole thing, that he thinks that Shamgod is one of the guys that has really, helped guys in the league.
Yeah, I really liked when he said that. I thought it was awesome. Just giving God some pub,
God gives himself his own pub.
Every player loves God Shamgod, and
it's true.
You can't find anybody who talks negative about this guy, and yeah, he just seems awesome.
I'm glad he's still on the map. So there you go. Yeah. Go check it out. Haralabob on Twitter. There's all kinds of other stuff we didn't get into, but
the Bob Beacon was lit today between all Mavs fans and media of text of like, go to Bob's Twitter right now.
But it fell under the radar because it was happening during like football and that crazy Cowboys game and the WNBA finals. Shout out to the Sky.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, we get regular Bob back. Like you were saying with the Magic thing, like if you didn't follow Bob or you didn't know anything about Bob before the Mavs, like he used to do this all the time. He used to put some coaches on blast and all this stuff. And it's like, now you kind of get, Bob back in the NBA Twitter world. And I'm just waiting for him to go on Simmons and really air it out.
He also said mad props or mad respect and love to Rick Carlisle, which I found interesting too. So there's no like bad blood, at least between them two on his side of it. On his side of it.
I want to see Rick's tweet back to that.
Oh, I don't want to see Rick's tweets at all. There you go, guys. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll get into what we learned from the preseason. We had to sort of push that because of the final roster and then the Haralabob stuff. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Maybe get into the 75 players. Join us tomorrow, guys. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On NBA. Go listen to Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Make that your second listen. Josh Lloyd doing incredible things on YouTube and on the podcast. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
So.
Boom.